So the deck that we're going to be going over today is called it's called the Pepper deck, but it's based entirely off of Sketchy Micro. So if you don't know what Sketchy Micro is, you should go and look into it. You don't have to be using Sketchy Micro to use the deck, but if you do use Sketchy Micro, it is synergistically more useful, this deck, than if you don't use Sketchy Micro. And I'm going to then talk about this deck in 3 criteria that I came up with on my handy dandy post-it. Every deck I usually think of in 3 big categories in terms of how useful it is. One is the information on it high yield, in the sense of like, is the information on it something that actually is something I'd get asked about? Is it something that would be tested? And is it something that will ultimately enhance my overall understanding of the human body? The second thing is actually just the formatting of the deck. If the formatting of the deck is bad, then it's really hard for me to edit a pre-made deck. And I always want to edit pre-made decks because I don't think having just a pre-made deck is usually helpful. I need to usually edit it to match my requirements. So the second criteria is usually, is the deck user intuitive, which ANKI itself is kind of crappy. So it even makes it worse when the deck itself is not that good. So the second criteria is just the usability of the deck, is a good way to say it. And the third one is actually the background information provided on the cards. Sometimes pre-made decks, all they do is they just have a closed deletion and it's just one sentence. And it's really hard because then it's like, where does the answer of that sentence come from? Where can I get more information on this? If I wanted to learn this concept, can I learn it from just the card, or do I have to go and research everything on my own? Because if I can learn it from just the card, that'll be really useful. So the 3 criteria I'm going to be judging this deck on are conciseness, as I said, the high yieldness, and the background. Okay, so now let's get to it. So I'm going to first start by just showing you how to download the deck because I know it can be confusing. Click on the link below, you'll be redirected to this page. Click on this Google Drive link, you'll be redirected here. It can be a bit confusing, but now what you're going to want to do is actually this one. It says Compressed Pepper Sketchy Micro, which is the micro part. That's the one that I use. And then I would also download this one, which is the Compressed Pepper Sketchy Pharm. When you download both of these, what's going to end up happening is, first of all, let me just show you. Let's see, download. It will scan for viruses. It'll say you can't. So I can't take any responsibility if you get a virus. I've downloaded it multiple times and it's been fine. So if you download it, it's going to download right here. Wait for it to finish downloading and then go ahead and open up your ANKI. Right, so now welcome back. You should have this thing now in your ANKI called the Sketchy deck. And one of them should say Sketchy Micro and Sketchy Pharm. The Sketchy Micro one is the first one you downloaded and the Sketchy Pharm one is the second one that you downloaded. All right, and so I'm going to walk you through this. I don't actually use this deck at all. What I've done is I've moved over the relevant cards that I've studied into my one legend deck, but I'm just going to go through these anyway, and hopefully you'll get an insight into what the deck is like. So now when we go into this, I want to go show you why this is such a good deck. So it says, which sequelae of strep pyogenes is not prevented by treatment? And now when you actually answer this question, the answer is post-streptococcal glomerulonephritis. I actually did know that because somehow maybe there's 2 copies of this card, but the point is, it shows you the specific sketchy micro picture that's associated with this, which is really nice for memory purposes. But the other part that's also really nice is if you go down and press show more about this topic, it actually takes you to the specific parts of first aid that are relevant to this topic. And that's what I love about this. So even though the cards themselves have this question and answer format, which is already really good, okay? The second part that I really like is that there's a supplement. And the third part that I really like is that there's an even further supplement about the first aid section that is really, really useful, okay? And that's why I personally really like the formatting of this deck. I think it's actually very high yield. Believe it or not, I guess if you get asked questions about micro in the hospital, a lot of these flashcards work really well. They cover the biggest points. And then the background information, aka I could relearn all of S. pyogenes just from this card if I wanted to, is also really good. So for that reason, I really, really like this deck. And I'm going to go over the ratings at the end, but just to show you what I meant by it's concise, it has a question and answer format, which is the way flashcards should be. It's very, very high yield. And I personally really like the fact that you can find out all the information you need just from one card. So let's do a couple more. What type of vaccines are available for influenza? Well, what you actually do have is you have a killed injectable virus and you have a live intranasal vaccine, okay? So those are the 2 that are available. Again, notice that I knew the answer because this card is also in my main deck, but the point is I have Kilned Injectable and I have Live Intranasal, and it shows me exactly what parts of the Sketchy video this is related to in the image, and that's why I said this deck works really well with Sketchy Micro. If you get Sketchy Micro, this deck synergistically works with it. And then, as I said before, if you wanted to get more information, the specific first stage section is right there. That's why I love this deck so much. It's such a good deck. And so you watch the Sketchy Micro video, okay, and then you come to this deck and you do the specific and relevant cards, and you will literally be set. And then you just do those cards over and over again. The other part that's really good about this deck is that microbiology and pharmacology are the two things in medicine that require a lot more rote memorization than other things. Like, for example, the treatment for listeria, there's no rhyme or reason as to why they use ampicillin, but the point is they do, and that's just something that you have to get in your head, right? And so getting ahead on micro using this deck and getting ahead on pharmacology using this deck is huge. Like, you could be doing so well by just knowing those things, because believe it or not, that's some of the stuff that you can start studying for, even without first of all, even without having covered it in class, but even if you have covered it in class, it's something that you can keep going with and memorize at an early stage so you don't have to worry about it. So for example, I actually started studying this deck last summer, and I've been studying it for at least a year at this point now. And now my micro and my Pharm are like that. I know both of them really well. And the good part about it is micro and Pharm are very longitudinal, and they're also very memorization heavy. But because I have that under my belt now, I can actually get on board with a lot of treatment plans. I can get on board with a lot of infections. I can get on board with a lot of antibiotics just because I have it in the back of my head. And that's something that you guys should get down, because I know a lot of medical students often bypass micro and Pharm because they're like, I'll just memorize it later. But that actually can work to your advantage, because you should memorize it as early as possible, because it's a lot more rote memorization. And so that way, when you actually have less time, you can spend that time on actually difficult concepts like endocarditis and all this other stuff. Went over that. This CD4 CMV, it's asking you for the CD4 level at which CMV can precipitate in a human being, and I believe this is less than 50. So a CD4 level less than 50 makes you more prone to getting CMV. And so right there again, as I said, it shows you more, and it has the direct image from Sketchy Micro, and that's why this deck is probably the best deck to use for micro. I'll also show you the Pharm deck, because Sketchy has a micro subsection and has a Pharm subsection. I would recommend that you use both of them, and I use both of these decks to supplement it, and then you've covered all your pharmacology and you've covered all your microbiology, all your microbiology, and that's huge, okay? And that's how I've learned both of my microbiology and pharmacology, and that's how most of my classes learned it, and they love it. And so this is a foolproof way to learn microbiology and pharmacology in medical school. All right, so now that I've shown you just the micro deck, I will briefly show you the Pharm deck, and then we'll move on. So the Pharm deck is also what I use, and so this one kind of goes over the pharmacology, but you'll see that vinca alkaloids work by inhibiting microtubule assembly, and right here it actually again has the image of the Pharm, and then it actually then has more topics about how alkaloids work, which is microtubule interactions, and that's why I really like this. So the Pharm deck is also really good, but the point is, I take these cards from these deck and I move them over to my master Sketchy deck, which includes not only Sketchy Micro, it includes some from Osmosis, it includes pretty much everything from all over. You can see right here I've included what this deck includes. It includes all of Sketchy Micro, and it includes all of Sketchy Pharm pretty much. And so now when I do this, and it also includes Boards and Beyond and immunology and a bunch of Osmosis stuff. So now when I actually study this, I can't even study this because I finished this deck for today. But when I study it, it includes cards from those sections. And so the point is, I actually really like that, because first, I've realized that this deck actually works, and second, it's actually been very, very high yield and very, very helpful. So if I'm going to judge this deck, in terms of the formatting of this deck, I actually give it a 3 out of 5, just because if I wanted to edit one of these, cards, it's actually really hard to do because it can be confusing. And I can go over how to edit them. If you have questions on how to edit these cards, I can show you how to do it in another video, but if you do have questions, let me know. But the point is, look, it's really confusing as to how to edit these cards. Okay, is this high yield? Yes, this is a very, very freaking high yield deck. I would highly recommend everyone get the Pepper Sketchy Micro and the Pepper Sketchy Pharm deck. And is the background on each card enough? Yes. I love the fact that each card has a show more and it always has this part from first aid. So that way I don't even have to ever read first aid. If I do these cards, I will have memorized the corresponding parts of first aid. So I give this a 3 out of 5 in terms of the formatting. I give it a 5 out of 5 in terms of high yield, and I give it a 5 out of 5 in terms of background for a grand score of, I'd say 13 out of 15, which is phenomenal. I think if there's anything you're triaging, on top of Zonky, this deck should be what you use for micro, and this deck should be what you use for Pharm, because I personally really like it, as long as you use Sketchy with it. Okay, point being, if you guys like this video, like, comment, share, subscribe, join the family, question below, let me know what you think, and I will see you guys in the next video, and thanks for watching.